Hello, everybody. Welcome. I want to say welcome back because we actually had some technical issues. So if you are hearing this beginning spiel twice, I apologize. But otherwise, welcome. I'm really excited to have you all with us here today. Thank you for taking this Tuesday morning to join us, especially after a long holiday weekend. Um, yeah, I'm just got to get my grounding for a little. I'm like, are we live yet? We can't really tell. So, actually, maybe this might happen for someone who's even an expert in live streaming, but live streaming is relatively new to Ashmi and I right now because we wanted to get on the space and share with everyone. But something we recognize and realize about live streaming that we don't really love is that we can't see you all. So we're not quite in like a two-way conversation with you. So something that helps with that and helps us get a sense of who's in the room with us and help us to kind of talk through the topics that's most relevant for you is actually through the comments today. So feel free to actually, if you're joining us now, to drop your name, your location in the comments below. And yeah, and just share with us what brought you to this topic today. So we're really excited. When we popped on earlier, we're like, oh my gosh, like we have 100 over 100 RSVPs, which is really exciting. I know not everyone's going to join us this morning because life happens, but for those of us who are here, thank you again, and we'd love to hear what brought you to this topic. But other than that, I would say continue to encourage the comments in forms of like questions that you might have throughout our topic today, or even just sharing sound bites of what resonated with you. I know that's always helpful to me when I'm in a space in a conversation when I'm like, oh yeah, like that thing I missed earlier was really helpful to hear again. And just general, like something to know how we're coming into this space today is just coming from a place of curiosity. Right? Ashmi and I are both really curious people. We both hold two particular perspectives around joy, but there's no right or wrong about this topic. And we'd love to hear how we all today can expand on that as well. So, welcome again for you to share any thoughts in the comments, especially if you don't agree with something we say. We'd love to hear that as well. And as love coaches, a big part of our perspective is that this is part of a larger journey, this conversation. So we're not here today to give advice or quick fixes around joy. So if that's something you're looking for today, you might be a little disappointed in that, but I still hope you get something very fruitful out of our collective wisdom. All right. So to get us started, and I do apologize for talking earlier. We spent like the first 5 minutes in like restream limbo, but we are here with everyone now. So, Ashmi, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Betty mentioned, we're so excited to have you guys join us. My name's Ashmi Patel. I'm coming to you from Dallas, Texas, and I'm a life coach for millennial folks of color who are trying to break free from survival mode, burnout, overwhelm, and I like to help them get closer to a life with more ease, space, and choice. A little bit about me. I'm a first generation Indian American. My parents immigrated here from India in the 80s. I'm neurodivergent, so late diagnosed ADHD. So if anyone's going through that journey as well, you know that kind of feels like you've taken a filter off of your life. Um, I when people ask me to describe myself, I feel like it's always been like a working answer, but lately, the way I like to describe myself is someone who's wildly curious, easily excitable, a deep feeler, and a constant daydreamer. And a lot of those things are things that I used to mask about myself. And recently, on my journey to joy, I've realized that those are the things that bring joy to my life, and I shouldn't be hiding them. And then a little bit about kind of how I come to my work is in the social change map, I identify as a caretaker, a storyteller, and I like to I like to create a community of care with my creative energy, willingness to be vulnerable, so that folks of color can have a safe space to unmask and show up in the world the way they want to. And
Mm.
the last thing is I like to say I'm all about soft accountability and slow journeys. So, usually if I'm talking to somebody, I like to let them know that if tough love works for them, that I'm not the one to give it to them. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but I do think that life is hard enough and I'm not in the business of making it harder. So, yeah.
Mm.
That's a little bit about me, Betty. I'll, kick it back to you.
I love that. I love that. I can definitely vouch for the deeply curious. That is something that I've always enjoyed in being in the same space with you. So excited for that today as well. And for the folks listening in, join us in these introductions. Feel free to drop your name and your location and what brought you to today's topic as well. We'd love to know who's in the room with us. As for me, hi everyone. My name is Betty Chan. I am a life coach, a facilitator, and a speaker, specifically around the topic of authenticity. Like, this is the hill I want to stand on for the rest of my life. And the way I come to this topic is really just about helping folks, either in the work context, in the life context, in the parenthood context, or even just trying to integrate all those parts of who we are. Like, Ashmi, really love the commas that you introduced after your name as well. My work is really about helping folks make those meaningful choices, right? Not just choices that make sure you can fit the bills or you can get that promotion. Again, those can be important things, but are we honoring ourselves in that process as well? So meaningful choices that honor who you are, that leads to just like a sense of like a calm, clear, and connected life. Like legacy for me is a big part of consideration. I am also from immigrant parents. Both hailing from Hong Kong and Burma as well. So the oral history of our family is kind of not so big. I'm also an only child. So just thinking about as I get older as well, like what is that legacy I want to create? What are those meaningful choices I can continue to invite into my life, even in the micro moments of like, how do I talk to someone that I don't really like right now, all the way to like, how do I make this decision on like, do I leave my job? Do I stay in my job? And so forth. So that is me in a nutshell. And thank you for folks for chiming into the chat. Hi, Karita. Lovely for you to join us from London.
Yeah,
So
so
good to see you as
exciting.
well. And Joy King. Wow, we got Joy in the room with us about Joy. This is wonderful. This is just making my day. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So before we dive into the convo, we thought it would be helpful to give a little bit of context of like, why was this topic even something that Ashmi and I landed on? This conversation actually began a few weeks ago when we were just trying to reflect on like, most of the year has gone by. Like, what were those things that made us feel excited about the year of 2023, right? So we're sharing these wins with each other, but as we were sharing it, we both kind of like, as life coaches, as we do, we notice I'm like, energetically, we both feel kind of flat. Like we're not particularly excited about the things we're saying. So this is a sensation we get a lot and we see in a lot of our clients as well, where there are things to be excited about, but the sensation and the feeling and embodiment of joy seems to not be present in the room with us. So that got us curious about like what is happening there, what actually helps us start to really embody and feel joy, what makes us forebode it and like keep it at a distance. So we just wanted to have an open conversation on like how do we get out of this cycle and like what does it look like to find more joy? I put quotations. We'll talk about why that's in quotations later on as well. But yeah, let's start with the basics. Ashmi, like, what does joy mean to you?
Yeah. So, I've obviously been thinking about that question for a very long time. And then in this particular context, I was thinking about how I would answer that today. And I mean, I think the first thing I wanted to share was that joy looks different to me. Like it's an evolving concept based on where I am in my
Mm,
life.
yeah.
And I think that's something that I've learned more recently because, at least for me, the way joy was presented was as if it's like this destination and you either get there or you don't. You either have it or you
Yeah.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's something that evolves. And I think, like everything else in your life, it has its waves, it has its ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to answer for what joy looks like for me right now and knowing that it'll change any given day. But I think joy for me is when I'm allowed to show up or when I'm able to show up as myself and feel like I don't need to mask and be authentic. And
Mm,
when I have the freedom to live my life the way I want to rather than the way I feel like I should is when
mm,
that's when the most joy comes in. I've noticed that I'm almost always surrounded by joy. It's just whether or not I'm in the place to like recognize it and let it in.
yeah.
Um, And so for me to have the conditions to recognize it and let it in, I need to feel like I can be myself and that I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
live up to like expectations or, any sort of obligations that might be weighing me down or blocking my joy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so right now that's how I would answer that question. How about you?
I really appreciate the seasonality of what you shared. And just a little before I share my answer, and also to buy some time so I can think about my answer. I welcome everyone to chime in on this question too. Like, what does joy mean to you? Feel free to leave that in a comment because Ashmi, you touched on a great point. Like, not only is it different from person to person, but for that individual, it can differ from season to season. I think at like if you ask Betty from like I don't know, like 3 years ago, joy would be accomplishing something, would be like achieving something, either a certification, a role, finishing a project, just like the completion of something was really satisfying. But I think I'm also in a place where the freedom to do what I want. I think that's the plainest. And it could sound selfish just hearing it out of context, but like what I really mean is like I've spent a long period of my time just doing like belated gratification. Like, okay, I got to work really hard for 10 years. I mean, honestly, at some point I was like, I got to work hard until I'm like 65, whatever retirement age is. And then they keep upping it every year. So I got to work even harder for a few more years before I can really enjoy what I have in my life. And even at the age of 8, I remember being really excited to be age 30, which is not very common for an 8-year old, but just to be like, oh, so I have everything, I've accomplished everything, and now I can enjoy it. So it feels very similar to the destination feeling that you mentioned. But I'm starting to realize that like my memory's not very good for one thing. So like having to like wait all the way to the end for this, I'm like, there's so much joy that I've missed along the way. And that right now is just like it's doing silly things. Like I think thinking back to last week around Thanksgiving, which my family doesn't really have a lot of traditions or rituals around. I was actually listening to a podcast that you were on, Ashmi, and I was like, you know what? I need some sunshine today. So I was walking around on my patio listening to it, and then my partner was out. It's cold here in Rhode Island at the moment. So I was like, oh, I need to warm up. So I just decided to do like a random like leapfrogging competition with my partner. And I was like, we're like in our 30s and our 50s, you know? It's like we're just randomly leapfrogging in the grass right now. But those moments where I'm just like, I'm just honoring what I need in the moment. I need sunshine. I need to listen to something. I need to go out and like do leapfrogs because I need to stay warm. Like I'm just allowing myself to feel what's important to me in the moment live rather than when I'm 65 or 70 by the time we get there of retirement. Yeah. But I'm curious for how do you connect to joy? Because we talked about how it's not a destination, that is actually around us, which was a really new concept for me even a few years ago. Like it's not something most of us consciously think about. So how did you connect to joy?
Yeah. I think for me, it like, I had to have the realization that what I thought was joy was what I was told was joy, if that makes sense.
Can you say more?
So, I think like in my mid 20s or something like that, I felt like I was chasing everything that, like you said, the accolades, whatever, like the degrees, the
Mm,
job someone
hmm
told me I should have to be stable, all those things. Um, and then and I was like, oh, I'm doing the things. I'm not feeling great about anything. What's the catch? And I think that's when I first started to realize that I was chasing the version of joy that other people told me I should want or have.
hmm
And I did not want any of those things. Or, they weren't
Yes.
fulfilling to me. It wasn't what was meant for me. And so I think that was the first step in being able to connect to joy, is to realize I was trying to connect to a version that wasn't what joy means for
Mm,
me.
yeah.
So, once I had that realization, that's kind of like where my therapy journey started. And my therapist helped me realize also, like, just the inner dialogue of just being so harsh on myself and like such a
Mm,
perfectionist at all times.
I can feel
you know, and
that.
I guess I'm going on a tangent to talk about what blocked my joy in order to get to what helps
Yeah,
me connect
actually,
to
let's
it.
just we'll talk about both
Okay.
because that's what today's
Okay.
conversation is.
And I think for me to be able to connect to joy, I had to identify what was blocking it in the first place.
Mm,
And it,
mhm,
right.
mhm,
And it was all these narratives and conversations I was having in my own head about trying to reach for this idea of perfectionism or this like ideal version of joy. Meanwhile, I'm like having all these experiences and doing all these things that I'm not even celebrating or recognizing.
mm,
And so I think my journey to connect to joy started with learning how to be kind to myself and give myself grace in
mhm,
order to even just see the joy in the first place, yet alone connect to it or feel it.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think when you start to realize that, and I don't really like the phrase like you're you're the person who gets in your own way, just because there are systemic issues, and that's like an
yes.
oversimplification of why something can be hard for somebody. But in that specific context, I was the one getting in my own way because I was too busy spiraling in all the things that I was chasing rather than taking a moment
Mhm.
to just sit and look around and see all the things that brought joy around me.
Yeah. What were what were the thoughts that were coming up for you when, because it sounded like there was a moment where you like recognized joy was like, I'm personifying it, was like a person
Mm-hmm.
standing next to you or like an energy next to you. Um, but you're not allowing yourself to connect with it, to feel it, to like, I
Yeah.
make the joke of like, or the analogy of like, yeah, if joy came knocking on my door, would I know to open the door and let the person in, kind of thing. So yeah, how did you reconcile with that? Like, hey, it's here, but I'm not really connecting with it.
Yeah. It's so funny. I just had a thought and I lost it. I think
Just like the joy, come
I
back.
know. Wow, it really just left my brain. I think like being able to realize that what I was chasing wasn't designed by me. It was designed by
Hmm.
everyone else around me. And, you know, like we live in a capitalist society where like hustle culture is elevated. And so even if
Hmm.
I was happy with something, ever like I was surrounded by a narrative that was like, well, you have to go chase the next thing. You have to be striving for more. And
Hmm.
so I just like internalized that to feel like,
Yeah.
oh, like if you're happy with this, you're almost like
Hmm.
apathetically settling for something.
Hmm.
And I had to realize for me, that's not true. Like, I think I want to be the type of person who exists in gratitude, which is different than being apathetic or settling. And I
Yes,
had to
that's the
understand the
feeling of connecting.
difference of that
Hmm.
and realize that living in gratitude allows me to have joy in my life. And also, you know,
Yeah.
want to be a better person and have self growth and all those things be values of mine. Um, yeah. So,
Okay. You helped me remember something that blocked me as well. Like a phrase I use a lot in my personal life is getting the most bites out of an apple. Maybe that stems from the perfectionist side of like
mm,
just trying to maximize an effort to get as much as I can out of it. And I think it feels parallel to this when it comes to my own journey with joy because yeah, it wasn't like there were things I was trying to achieve that weren't even joyful, but I thought I had to in order to create like stepping stones to the thing that was joyful. Like going back to my previous example of like being 30 was like the form of joy for me because that the being 30 represented, which I'm much older than 30 now, but being 30, it's like a representation of like having your stuff together, of having that confidence, of having that calmness, of like knowing where I'm going in life. I already have something solid I could stand on in life. But to get there, right, you have to have a stable job, you have to have a really clear career path, you have to have promotions, you have to have cool clients and projects, you have to have a partner, you have to have a family, a white picket fence, and 2 dogs. No, it's 2.5 kids and a dog. I think that's what the recommendation is. So it's like all these little steps that, like you said, it's like a lot of it is like sometimes it's, I think at minimum it's society, like through media. Like I did grow up in a generation of like Disney movies. So like even when it comes to romance and joy in romance, like that was a big template for that. And there's also like the family set of like values of joy, of like hardworking, dedication in my family at least. And just like coupled with it, it started to feel like I was bound with a lot of different requirements. Like
Mm.
I had to navigate through this like tangled web of things and yet still had to form these clear steps of how to find my joy. Um, but you also reminded me of like the blocking of it happened, I felt like in a few phases, right? So like we've talked about this before where there almost feels like an arc to journey. So while we don't encourage the thinking of like destination is a joy somewhere else over there that you got to get to, joy is something like we hold as a philosophy. It's always around you, it's at your fingertips. It's learning how to be present to it and connect to it. But I think like early on, like if I rewind back the tape, like there were moments of like the vibe was like I hate life and life hates me right now. Like I
Mm.
have nothing to be happy about. I've worked so hard. I've got the titles, I've got whatever I wanted to get, and like I still don't like my life. I don't like how I'm showing up in life. And then I think when I got tired of that feeling, I was starting to be like, okay, I do want joy. I understand that like I want joy in my life. And there were things that I was starting to recognize either through therapy, talking to friends, and just talking with anybody, really strangers. You start to realize and get out of your own head and your own bubble of, hey, there are things to be grateful for. Like even just every day, the sun coming up is something to be grateful for. I have a roof over my head. I have a warm sweater to wear on. I have 3 jackets to pick from as opposed to no jackets at all. So starting with like the little things and recognizing it, but I would ration joy of coming in, right? So
Mm.
I'm curious if this happened for you too, Ashmi, where like if a bigger joyful thing happened or was about to happen, sorry, I keep going back to promotions, which just seems to be top of mind, which is funny. I haven't been in the space of that for a moment, but it's like once you got something you wanted, the first thought is like, oh, well, that's something terrible is going to happen, right? Like, oh, I've just manifested. Like a thing I hear a lot from my clients, because they are, a lot of them are parents. They look at their kids, right, and they're like, oh, it's that peaceful, like they turn off the light after bedtime stories, and they're just so grateful that their kids are happy or healthy. And but then the first thing they think of is like, oh, like what if something bad happens? Like this happens all the time in my household. We don't have children, but we do have a dog who's 11 years old and extremely healthy for an 11-year-old. He gets mistaken for a 2-year-old pup all the time. And like we're not grateful for that most of the time. Most of the time we're just like, oh well, we got to make sure he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that, and like we have to make sure he doesn't get hurt. Like there's a lot of like, instead of just being present to like the joyfulness of like this thing still being in our life and being in the way that we wanted, we start catastrophizing some of the things. And again, like I don't think it's something that we do to ourselves alone. It is a learned behavior as well. But I'm just curious how, yeah, what does the thought of rationing joy bring up for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Hearing you talk, all of that like really resonated. And yeah, I think this concept of rationing joy or the idea of like foreboding joy where like you feel happy, but then immediately you're like, oh, like when's the next shoe gonna drop? Or I have to be
Mm-hmm.
prepared. Like I think to me it also links to vulnerability. I was reading something the other
Mm.
day. Um, I think it was Brene Brown. It must have been knowing me. Um, where, she was saying joy is the most vulnerable feeling.
Mm.
And I think when it comes to foreboding joy or feeling like, oh, when's the next shoe going to drop? I think we feel really vulnerable and almost open when we're feeling joy and allowing ourselves to feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like a protection mechanism to prepare ourselves for the next thing, especially
Yeah.
if it's a learned behavior you've had your whole life, right? Like you feel almost like too raw and too exposed to the world if you're going to sit in your joy. But
Mm-hmm.
instead, if you're like, okay, I'm prepared for the next bad thing that's going to happen, whether or not it happens, you're going to be in waiting mode and like prepared for it. And and
Yeah.
so when you're talking about rationing joy, you know, like it unlocked something for me of like, how much of my life am I spending in waiting mode for something that just never happened in the first place? And all the
Mm-hmm.
joy that was around me while I was in waiting mode just went unfelt. That doesn't fully make sense, but I think everyone gets what I'm trying to say. And and so I think I'm trying to remind myself not to ration the joy, and you know, like I'm
Mm.
prepared if something happens, it's gonna be fine. But in the meantime, why don't I just like enjoy what I have? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like the doing of it. And you're right, that is a protection of like most people don't think of joy as scary, but I do think Brene is the one who mentioned like joy is one of the most like I think she says terrifying. It's the way she describes the terrifying emotions because it does feel so raw. It does, and I realize I'm like most of the time when I do feel joy, I'm not doing anything anymore. When
Mm.
I'm feeling it, I'm just being present. And there are moments in my life where like I just have to like I mean it comes from 10 years of being in project management. I have to look for the problem and I got to fix the problem before anyone else realizes the problem is there. So that's a very like trained instinct of me professionally that's like bled into my personal life as well. But also like you helped me remember that I mean I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for every immigrant family, but imagine it would be very similar, right? Like our parents went to a different country, probably not having, most of them not having a lot. I'm sure every family has a story of like, I came to America with like $5 in my pocket or some equivalent of that version, having to like put our hard earned everything back in the home country as well. And that's what they had to do. They had to learn to survive here, right? So, like, every time they accomplished something, get a home, get a meal on the table, have our kids get into the education system that I can't even speak the same language of sometimes. Like that is very, very much of like, I just got to worry about the next thing. And I think that energy got passed down because that like those are the first models we have
Mm-hmm.
as young kids. And even now that is still the model I have from whenever I am with my parents. So just like which in the practice of joy and gratitude, I'm very grateful they're there, even though they annoy me to high heaven sometimes. And yes, this will be recorded, Mom, even though I know you can't understand. She understands. But it is that like I learned it from them of like, oh, we gotta stay busy. We gotta keep in that doing. We gotta have something to do. And if that's what you're used to, being still with joy feels very, very awkward. And I think because it's not a comfortable feeling, those of us who have this pattern in our life as well, whether it's from immigrant family, just from working, um, yeah, we start to like push it away and like what is that next catastrophe I can look at, or like what is the next joyful thing I can plan, right? So that happens during vacations too. You have this beautiful vacation and before it's over you're trying to like plan the next one. I'm
Yes.
guilty of this all the time. Like, Betty, you're like 4 more days, like please enjoy what you've already created here before you go to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think talking about having immigrant parents, and you know, for those listening, if this resonates, pop something in the comments, like if you also
Yes.
agree or disagree with any of this. But yeah, like I was listening to you talk. Yeah, I think most of us children of immigrants have heard some sort of story of like, you know, like my dad tells me all the time how he used to walk a couple extra blocks in Chicago snow to save like 15 cents on the bus, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't even pick 15 cents off of the floor if I walk past it. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I am trying to reflect on as I get older is our parents didn't have a choice. Like for them, it really was planning for the next catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their survival mode. Like that's what their life was, right? Like surviving from one thing to the next.
Mm-hmm.
I think as children of immigrants who are now adults, who probably have many more privileges than our parents did, we are now we're now faced with the choice that we're allowed to make. And I'm like, my parents had to live in survival mode, but they also have a very different sense of gratitude than I do because they walked two extra
Mm-hmm.
blocks to save 15 cents, right? And now that they don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do that, they do have gratitude that I can learn from, and I can choose to lean into the gratitude side
Mm-hmm.
and not the
Mm-hmm.
survival mode side.
Yes.
Um, but I think I had to realize that that's my choice and that I have to, do the work to unlearn some of the survival mode techniques and
Yeah.
pick the other side.
Yeah. And also it's new for us, right? It may not be new for everyone out there or everyone even listening, but it's if you don't have that example in your life on how to like connect with joy through gratitude, that becomes challenging. And Ashmi, I'm just peeking into the comments that some folks have left us as well. Like Johnny mentioned, like the wariness to celebrate big moments. It feels like it's jinxing to do that. That's something I definitely resonate with. Mike mentioned it sounds similar to people who are descended from internal migrants too. Yes, yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
fair point. I think it's just like coming from a family who's had to do that struggle and that hardship and that readjustment. And yeah, that is for our Black friends who are listening as well. Chicago winter walking extra block is no joke. Yes. I've seen photos of like Chicago in the cold and there's like icicles going horizontal. So that is definitely really challenging. I did want to go back to Johnny's comment of like the jinxing. Does that come up for you, Ashmi?
I think it's definitely a cultural thing. I haven't felt it too much like immediately, but I've heard about it have like cultural context of like if you say something good has happened to you, you're exposing it for people to like
Mm-hmm.
send you bad wishes or ill wishes, which can then affect you. And I mean, I think everyone to a different degree either believes that or not, but the fact that that has a cultural that like has a place in our culture, and
Mm-hmm.
at some point in time, many people did believe that.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to affect, right? Like how a lot of
Yeah.
people think or how a lot of people share good news.
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen it manifest, I think, in our generation of folks who are trying to figure out how to be a third culture kid.
Mm.
And I think, things like that, like jinxing or evil eye or whatever, make their way into the way we think without us knowing where it came from, which
Mm-hmm.
almost makes it harder to unlearn.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely has some significance for us. How about?
Yeah. I mean, I think, a takeaway I'm taking from this conversation, which is something I've known, but a good reminder is like question the rules that are around you, right? Especially the unspoken rules, because we start to treat them as truths. And from the types of joy that were handed down to us to this, to what you just mentioned as well, Ashmi, and like that starts to bind us and keeps us from joy. I think that's another form of blocker. But in terms of the jinxing, we didn't have so much the jinxing or the evil eye language in my household growing up, but it felt similar in the sense of like, once you find joy, you have to like protect it. Like you have to protect it and
Mm,
hide it, right? It's like squirreling away joy. I think one thing growing up, I remember hearing my mom say again and again, is like, after every time she realized I did something as a mom, she's like, "Oh, you're so good at this, but make sure you don't tell anyone so they can't take advantage of you." Which then encouraged me to hide all the good things about myself, which are usually the things that it's connected to my joy, right? Like crafting, doodling. That's all I can come up with at the moment, friends. There's more, I promise. But it's just whatever I found that like I was really excited for, my first instinct was to shrink and to hide it. And I
mm,
think that feels like the jinxing that Johnny mentioned in the comments as well. It's like this protection of it that had to happen, but coupled with just like my project management sensibility, being an only child of immigrants, which meant like I had to become an adult really early on to translate adult things for my parents because they were not as fluent in English. It's this like belief that I had of like, oh, if I don't look for trouble, if I don't then look for the thing that's going to come and destroy and crush my joy that my mom keeps warning me about, no one else will know to do it, and that will crush all our joys. So I become this like belief of like I had to become that savior of joy, and like I had to be on this lookout and be hyper vigilant about things. So that feels akin to like once something good happens, then I have to like instinctually start looking for all the bad things that might happen, as opposed to just like recognizing the good. And like a tangible example I want to share is like on during the pandemic, my pandemic hobby was flipping furniture. And
Mhm.
I've never sold furniture. I've actually been told a lot of my life that I wasn't good enough to be a creative. So, like, going off and like knowing nothing about furniture, self teaching myself, which is most things I've done in life, and like designing furniture, I had imposter syndrome like, who's going to pay money for this? Right.
Yeah.
So, but it's when I got my first sale, I remember these thoughts of like, okay, I'm gonna post it up. It looks really cool. I was like, this looks beautiful, but what if nobody buys it? And then somebody offers to buy. I'm like, oh, but maybe like don't celebrate yet. It's not a real purchase until like until the money's in my hand or until we've done the exchange. Like, what if they come and they see it and they don't want it? And then even after the money exchange happens and they buy it and they tell me how wonderful it is and like how excited they were to have this piece in their home, I then like for the next 2 days, I'm like, don't put the money in your bank because they might reach out and ask for a refund because they'll find something they don't like, right? There's just like all these random excuses to be like, don't come here, Joy, don't come here. And it's just like in that little bit of like the 2 day transaction, like there's so many moments of joy. The joy of finishing my furniture, the joy of seeing something beautiful that I created out in the world, the joy of having other people interested and like feeling that community of shared joy as well. Honestly, making a sale is like a really, really great feeling. I don't know anyone who doesn't love that. That was part of it. And just like, yeah, it's just there were so many moments of like, let me not let this in case it jinx this interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. I do wanna we got a good question in the comments if you're okay
Oh,
with me.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it's from Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany. It says, where do you find the balance between letting joy in and actively working towards joy? So doing the things you know bring you joy, even if those are, even if those are hard. And is this actually the same thing? This is a
Mm,
great question. I think, and Betty, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this and other folks in the comments. Like, what do you guys think?
mm,
I think if you're a perfectionist, I think it is easy to get lost in the trap of doing in order to get joy
mm-hmm,
because that's all a lot of us know is like doing is the only way to get anything because we were taught that it is what is elevated in society, toxic productivity, all of that. So I
mm-hmm,
do think there's probably a fine line between doing too much and then still not feeling the joy.
mm,
And so I guess my answer is it's a fine balance of almost having the self awareness of knowing when you're overdoing it to the point where you're now like burnt out in the process of seeking joy.
mm-hmm,
And I think you have to allow yourself to sit in it rather than chasing the next thing.
mm-hmm.
I think that's my answer.
Okay.
It's clearly still baking in my mind. So,
I mean, it's a tough question, and I'm gonna actually bring up something that Tiffany, you make me mad at me for. But I guess my first question comes in mind is why do we have to make that distinction, right? Like,
mm,
because I do, it goes back to like we have to qualify joy before we can let joy in. Like, if it's just feeling, if like sitting present and sitting still and like doing nothing, and you realize, oh, I can already find joy in this moment, that's joy. right? That's joy for you, if that's your form of joy. Actively inviting in sunshine because I'm like, oh, I realize I've been in a dark house and I haven't left the house in a few days, and going outside for just a little stroll, you're inviting that in as well. That is also joy. So like as long as Ashmi said, like as long as you feel that joy, and that's actually going to bring up a question for me in our chat, like what does joy actually feel like for us? I think the difference is so marginal that like just think of it as like a menu of ways to bring in enjoy. Like I know Ashmi and I love the concept of menus. Like there's no one way to go about it, right? So if you're in a moment where like life is coming at you and it's like handing you joy, like this is a baked cake of joy, please take it, Ashmi. Like take it, just take it. And if you find that like you've been craving cake and there's no cake around, go out and invite it in, right? So that's what I would say. It's a distinction. The one is more about active well-being, but you need the prior to actually feel that joy. So Ashmi, when you feel joy, what, like as an outsider, if you're in a joyful moment, what would I say? And what would you feel
Oh,
inside?
well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an easily excitable person.
Mm.
So I'm the type of person who, like, I'll do a happy dance if I really like my food. The other day I was like in a little boutique smelling all the fragrances with a friend of mine, and I found the one, and I I didn't even know I did it, and I did like a little happy dance because I just like couldn't keep it in.
Yeah.
So I think when I'm unmasked, it's very obvious when I'm feeling joy because I can't help but just like show it or do a little wiggle or whatever. Um, I also think that if I am really relaxed,
Mm.
that that's joy manifesting
Mm.
for me. Like if I don't look flustered or stressed out, then I'm probably feeling joy.
Yeah.
What's it
Yeah,
like for you?
that's like the wiggle feels right. I was like, when you said it, I was like, I want to wiggle right now. And I'm seeing one of the comments too, like joy doesn't always look the way we've been told. And yes, that's absolutely true. Like I think growing up in a family that has a hard time just expressing themselves even with words, let alone their bodies, like doing a
Mm-hmm.
wiggle feels like they're like, what are you doing, Betty? But that just feels like natural energy. And I think that's why last week I was just joyful to have a moment of rest. Like, let me do some leapfrogs, right? So I do notice joy comes up for me in like this burst of movement. Sometimes it could be as simple as just like a giant smile comes on my face and like I can't help but smile. Sometimes it's literally jumping up and down and doing a dance as well. There's also like quieter forms of joy where it's just like I want to say it's like if I go to bed in a joyful manner, then I'm probably more likely to sleep on my back than curled on my side, even though I'm mostly a side sleeper. There's a sensation of like an openness and like this sinking back and like this relaxing that lets things in. And to what was brought up in the comments, it can be so simple. It can be something we do every day and we're just not conscious of it, but actually recognizing what joy looks like and feels like for you and like asking other people too, like getting ideas from others.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think I realized the sitting still form could be joyful because I was such a doer for most of my life until I heard that from a friend. It was like joy to me is like going to bed and just sleeping without having worries the next day and feeling that relaxation that comes over me. And I was like, oh, yeah, like that is not a common sensation in my life right now. And back to what Tiffany mentioned, like if I notice I want the cake of joy, like, okay, I'm gonna go get some. I can actually invite that in. And I don't have to go out to do it. It's like right there in front of me. Can I just like be with it right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, reading the comments, something else that I still believe this is I think I still believe that in order to feel joy, it has to be hard or a struggle. And I feel like for me, if it wasn't hard enough, I feel like I don't deserve to sit in the joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that is something like I think you have to understand that everybody deserves joy. And if it feels like it came to you easy, then that doesn't make it any less valuable,
Yes. Yeah.
and you're allowed to still have it.
Yeah. We're allowed to still have it. Um, Jenny had a good insight. For a long time, I'd mistaken joy for pleasure and satisfying appetite. And I feel like, Johnny, knowing you, appetite might refer to something beyond just like eating good food, which is a form of joy for a lot of us as well. So that is, yeah, that is part of the doing and like qualifying like what joy is. So just learning, taking the time to learn and be present of like, what does that feel like for you? For some people, it is joy, or that's one form of joy. But what else is there? Giving yourself a menu of options so that you can, when you do need to sit still and like just let it in, there's more options that can come to you and bring more joy into your life as well. So I feel like we could have this conversation for like 16 days straight.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm also seeing that we're almost at time. Yeah, I think actually I'll close this out with like just what helps you keep going. I know we kind of started talking about that. Like what helps
Mhm.
you continue to, as we say it, let joy in.
Yeah. I mean, I think first it's remembering to ease up on the pressure. So, as a recovering perfectionist, it really, perfectionism can find its way into any aspect of your life. So, even
Hmm.
if I'm like trying to feel joy, sometimes I tell them like putting too much pressure on it. And sometimes you have days or phases in life where you're just not feeling it that much. And I think that's okay too. And you have to allow yourself to just
Yeah.
be the way you need to be in that moment,
Mm.
because pushing too hard for it is also going to strip away whatever little bits of joy you might be feeling. So I think first is just easing up on the pressure. I find
Hmm.
that surrounding myself with other people who feel joy and are like models of how to feel it or want to talk about it with me is a really great way for me to keep going.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's this concept of glimmers, which in the neurodivergent world, a lot of people use. And a glimmer can be anything, as like a walk around the lake, or you eat an ice cream, or
Mm.
you wore your favorite sweater today, whatever. But the concept of noticing the glimmers in your day is actually like a psychological concept to also help your nervous system, because it helps rewire your brain to notice the good things and
Yes.
sit in
Hmm.
that. So I think for me, it's making sure that I pay attention to the glimmers. And like me and my best friend for a while would message each other glimmer of the day to like
Mm.
have the accountability of reminding ourselves to notice them. And
Yeah,
so I
can I
was
join in
much,
on this text chain?
yeah, totally. I was like much more likely to go for a walk that day because I wanted to share my glimmer with her, or much more likely to
Yeah.
like see the flowers on the corner because I have
Oh.
someone to share it with. So I do think
Hmm.
sharing your joy or like finding your joy community can be a really good way to keep going, because
Hmm.
putting all of that pressure on yourself can be way too much
Yeah.
for one person, and that's like a lot of responsibility. So
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I've heard of that, like surround yourself with the models you want. Like I've heard of that concept in rest, but I think it's also important in joy, and having friends who are easily excitable to be able to remind you like, oh yeah, I can get excited about all the glimmers in my life as well. Um, I think for me, because like right now I'm in the season of like freedom and autonomy is such a big source of joy for me.
mm,
I honor that by like every day. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but doing one thing that I want to, not because I have to, right? So like even something as simple as like my partner wants me to come down to dinner like right now, but like the thing I really want to do right now is actually finish this thing that I was creating, this drawing that I was doing, and allowing myself the space of like, hey, can I get 15 more minutes? Asking for that little bit of time so that I could stay present with the thing that's making me joyful at that moment. And just, yeah, practicing, prioritizing your want so you could hear what your body and your mind and your heart and soul is telling you about. Yes, this is your form of joy, not what society tells you, not what your family tells you, not what your internal judgments tell you, but like what is your true sources of joy
Mm.
as well. Yeah. All right, friends, I know we're coming to a wrap. If you all enjoyed, first of all, thank you to the folks in the comments.
Yes.
It's so helpful because we can't see you. This is different from our usual webinars and workshops where we get to engage with everyone. So it's really helpful to see what you all picked out of the conversation, but also just hearing the really helpful insights and nuances around what is blocking you from joy and how do you let joy in as well. Again, just like this is, we're all modeling, we're giving each other
Mm.
ideas right now to do it. We're If you're enjoying this, Ashmi and I are actually going to be back with another friend that we have, Coach Corinne, and we're going to be talking about end of year reflections, which is actually a practice, an intentional practice that you can help with being able just to reflect back, like as we said at the start of this conversation, what helped us realize like there were accomplishments but we weren't feeling joyful about it. Being in that practice of like just reflecting on what's even present to begin with could be really incredibly helpful. So stay tuned for that. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We'll be announcing that very soon this week on like the time and date on when we're going to do it. And also, if you want to just learn more about our coaching, as you can tell, we're both coaches who relish and really cherish the gentle journey, right? So, Ashmi, you framed it really beautifully earlier. I won't be able to repeat it verbatim. On my end, like I love holding gentle space to do the hard work in life, right? So like our coaching holds that space. And if you want to learn more about it, feel free to pop onto our website. And also, as you could, I hope you could tell from this, we're both very open and very like friendly people. So if you want to just like talk about joy and like not even like, oh, I need to like get into a coaching container or anything, just to like get some perspective around things, like we both offer discovery calls as well and welcome that conversation. So feel free to do that, especially if that's going to bring you joy.
Yeah, and just to add another layer, I'm the type of person that things need to marinate, and then later I have these like aha moments.
Hmm.
I love hearing people's aha moments, so you can come back to this event and leave us a comment or just DM us. And anything that after you've marinated a little bit, even if it's a question or just if you want to celebrate with somebody that you have a glimmer of the day, like we would love to hear about them
Yes.
as well. So yeah, reach out. We love hearing about all things joy.
Yes, definitely. We'll share in the glimmer together.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us this Tuesday. And yeah, hope your day has much more joyful moments after this conversation. All right. Have a good one,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.